more about another factor or this factor, you're able then to add it to what you already have and improve the model. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the beauty of statistical modeling. The more data you get, the better they get. And so that's why it's such an exciting time to live in, where, my passion is really environmental science. So I'm trying to understand how these processes occur in space and time. And before, it was almost like looking at it through a piece of Swiss cheese. You only really knew what was going on in a few little spots. But now data is so inexpensive to collect, and we get these data streams. So now all of a sudden the challenge is, how do you deal with these big volumes of data that are coming in high velocity and try to understand what's actually happening within all of that? So
now, you came to Australia back in 2005 and from America. How did you end up in Australia?
Yeah, well, I was working in Colorado on my PhD, which was in spatial statistical modeling on river networks. So I was quite passionate about water quality and also how you design monitoring programs. Because at the time, and still to this day, when you don't have a lot of resources, you sort of put out it's not quite random, but let's say a random sample across river networks. And so every location has a probability of being sampled. And then let's say if you had 100 samples and 10 of them had poor water quality, then you could make an inference and say 10% of streams across the state are in poor water quality. But the very next question someone has is, well, okay, so what do I do? Where do I go? How do I fix this? And that type of monitoring doesn't tell you anything about where. So that was sort of the motivation for my research, and it still is the motivation for my research, is how do you help managers understand where? And so I was working on a spatial statistical modeling project, and my former boss from CSIRO was in the U.S. at a conference, and she introduced herself to me and said that she had a job, and I thought, well, Australia sounds nice, so luckily it was Brisbane, which is nice, and so my husband and I just moved to Australia.
And you haven't looked back, have you?
No, I stayed at CSIRO for 10 years, so I was a senior research scientist there, and then a team leader, and then finally after 10 years I moved to QUT.
Everyone talks about big data these days. Really, how much has data changed just in the time, in the last 13 or so years since you've been in Australia? How have the problems you're dealing with changed because of the influx of all this data?
Well, I think, I feel like it's taking forever because I keep saying in 5 years it'll be different. But if you look back to when I came, it was quite different. So, we have in situ sensors, which you can put out in the environment, and they collect data every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes. So you have this constant data stream. And as the cost of sensors comes down, that means we can buy more and more sensors. So, for example, I work on a project in the U.S. where we have more than 22,000 in-stream temperature sensors deployed across the region. And so that allows us to fit models to those data and make predictions across the whole of the western U.S. So it would be unheard of to have semi-continuous monitoring at 22,000 locations 10 years ago compared to what it is now. So we don't have in situ sensors for everything we want to measure, but we're starting to see that technology progress. And so I suspect in 10 years we will have massive volumes of data coming from all sorts of environmental variables that we want to monitor for public health, environmental health, maybe even economic health.
Which is a good lead into what I wanted to talk about next. Another project you're involved with involves ACIMS has node universities, 7 different universities around Australia. You're working with researchers at Monash now and a different type of project involving the reef. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is the aim of this project, and how are you going about doing this?
Yeah, so this is a really nice example of what you can do when you have cross-node collaboration in a place like ACIMS. So We have a partnership with the Queensland Department of Environment and Science, and they're responsible for measuring water quality at end of catchment. So in the Great Barrier Reef catchments as well as other places in